Educational quotes about university. Wow. A university should be a place of light, of liberty, of learning. The quality of a universe is measured more by the kind of student it turns out than the kind it takes in. What we become depends on what we read. After all of the professors have finished with us, the greatest university of all is a collection of books. No university in the world has ever risen to greatness without a correspondingly great library. When this is no longer true, then will our civilization have come to an end. Freedom of inquiry, freedom of discussion, and freedom of teaching. Without these, a university cannot exist. A university's essential character is that of being a center of free inquiry and criticism, a thing not to be sacrificed for anything else. A university's most worthy of rational admiration is that one in which your lonely thinker can feel himself lonely most positively, furthered, and most richly fed. One learns more from listening than speaking, and both the wind and the people who continue to live close to nature still have much to tell us, which we cannot hear within university walls. The task of a university is the creation of the future, so far as rational thought and civilized modes of appreciation can affect the issue. There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university, a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see. A university is not a political party, and an education is not an indoctrination. Reading. This is my favorite reading. I love to read. So would you all, when you get the two principles by Harry Schefter in this speed reading self-taught book. It's amazing. It teaches you how within 5 minutes you can read over more than 350 words a minute, and even 500 if you really push yourself, and 1,000 in quick, just like novels and cute. One is, the two principles are, one is eye span and the other is no friction. No vocalization, sub-vocalization, finger movements going back and forth. And just like how we watch a TV, movies, and what your eyes see, your mind grabs. Just like that, so cute. You'll love reading from here on. Reading makes a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. How many a man has dated a new era in his life from the reading of a book? A truly good book teaches me better than to read it. I must soon lay it down and commence living on its hint. What I began by reading, I must finish by acting. A good book is an education of the heart. It enlarges your sense of human possibility, what human nature is, of what happens in the world. It's a creator of inwardness. The key to life are running and reading. When you are running, there is a little person that talks to you and says, "Oh, I'm tired. My lungs about to pop. I'm so hurt. There's no way I can possibly continue." You want to quit. If you learn how to defeat that person when you're running, you will know how to not quit. When the things get hard in your life, for reading, there have been zillions of people that have lived before all of us. There's no new problem you could have with your parents, with the school, with bully. There's no new problem that someone hasn't already had and written about it in a book. I started reading literature at 17 and 18. I felt like an extra beat to life. The more I read, the more I acquire, the more certain I am that I know nothing. Shakespeare's, Dickens, Mark Twain, and so many others were my dearest friends and greatest teachers. I've never known a trouble. Then I was reading, then I saw I'm reading more than ever. I used to find it tedious, but now it's like my little friend. Reading builds the educated and informed electorate. It's so vital to our democracy. I think reading is important for a variety of things. I mean, first of all, it's a way to get information and find out what's going on in the world, but also it helps your imagination. Reading serves as a good escape when you are in the middle of the doing crazy things. Reading and discovering fiction has taught me how to empathize, understand falling in love, and all those complex relationships that people have to deal with. Life being very short and the quiet hours of it few, we ought to waste none of them in reading valueless books. Reading and life are not separate but symbiotic. And for this serious task of imaginative discovery and self discovery, there is and remains one perfect symbol: the printed book. I like reading a book because we learn from books. We learn about history, we learn even about future. Any book that helps a child to form a habit of reading, to make reading one of his deep and continuing needs, is good for him. Mere reading of the scriptures is not enough. A person cannot understand the true significance of the scriptures if he is attached to the world. Reading is a basic tool in the living of a good life. Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. Properly, we should read for power. Man reading should be man intently alive. The book should be a ball of light in one's hand. With one's day reading, a man may have the key in his hands. It is a good thing for an uneducated man to read books of quotation. Sit down and read. Educate yourself for the coming conflicts. Reading books is great, but if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. Reading furnishes the mind only with material of knowledge. It is thinking that makes what we read ours. I hate books, but only teach us to talk about things we know nothing about. Reading is more like a left brain process, and listening to music is a right brain function. You cannot learn men from books. Do not be guilty of possessing a library of learned books while lacking learning yourself. You shouldn't teach great books. We should teach up to love the readings. Someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. Children should learn that reading is pleasure, not just something that teachers make you do in school. Reading is equivalent to thinking with someone else's head instead of with one's own. Reading, like writing, is a creative art. If readers can only bring a narrow range of themselves to the book, then you will only see their narrow range reflected in it. My alma mater was books, a good library. I could spend the rest of my life reading, just satisfying my curiosity. What is reading but silent conversation? Writing and reading is to me synonymous with existing. The best advice I ever got was that knowledge is power and to keep reading. When you cease from labor, fill up your time in reading, meditation and prayer, and while your hands are laboring, let your heart be employed as much as possible in divine thoughts. I didn't go to school much, so I taught myself what I knew from reading. If one cannot enjoy reading a book over and over again, there is no use in reading it at all. Whatever the cost of our libraries, the price is cheap compared to that of an ignorant nation. Read not to contradict and confute, not to believe and take for granted, but to weigh and consider. There are worse crimes than burning books. One of them is not reading them. I spend a lot of time reading. Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft. Never stop learning, because the day you stop learning and creating must be the most boring day. Anyone who stops learning is old, whether it's at 20 or 80. The mind, once enlightened, cannot again become dark. Learning should be a joy and full of excitement. It's a life greatest adventure. It is an illustrated excursion into the minds of the noble and the learned. The minute that you are not learning, I believe you are dead. Learning is its own exceeding great reward. Develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow. A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. Unlearning. Education consists mainly of what we have unlearned. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn and relearn. Perfecting oneself is as much unlearning as it is learning. In some sense, of our ability to open the future will depend not on how well we learn anymore, but on how well we are able to unlearn. It's not a question of learning much. On the contrary, it's a question of unlearning much. The first problem for all of us, men and women, is not to learn, but to unlearn. The most important lessons lay not in what I needed to learn, but in what I first needed to unlearn. Unlearning is about moving away from something, letting go rather than acquiring. It's like stripping old paint. It lays the foundation for the new layer of fresh learning to be acquired and to stay. It is not hard time to learn more. What is hard is to unlearn when you discover yourself wrong. Formal versus self-education. Doubt grows with knowledge. People who are overeducated become risk averse. The only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. If the primary purpose of a school was education, internet should obsolete it. But school is mainly about credentialing. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg didn't finish college. Too much emphasis is placed on formal education. I told my children not to worry about their grades, but to enjoy learning. My natural inclination to be impure rather than to be educated characters serves me well. Men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education. How is it that little children are so insignificant and men so stupid? It must be education that does it. All claims of education notwithstanding, the pupil will accept only that which his mind craves. People will play more to be entertained than educated. One of the greatest problems of our time is that many schools, but few are educated. If I was educated, I'll be a damn fool. The aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment to all at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed a standard citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. An inventor is simply a fellow who doesn't take his education too seriously. It's possible to get an education at a university. It has been done, not often. I prefer the company of the peasants because they have not been educated sufficiently to reason incorrectly. Education is a system of imposed ignorance. The mere imparting of information is not education. School is the advertising agency which makes you believe that you need the society as it is. Education is the period during which you are being instructed by somebody you do not know about something you do not want to know. Far from failing in its intended task, an educational system is in fact succeeding magnificently because its aim is to keep the American people thoughtless enough to go on supporting the system. I suppose it's because nearly all children go to school nowadays and have things arranged for them. They seem so forlornly unable to produce their own ideas. Thank goodness. I was never sent to school. It would have robbed off some of the originality. Homeschooling. In home is the chief school of human virtues. Real education must ultimately be limited to men who insist on knowing the rest is mere sheep herding. One of the marks of an educated man today is to know what not to read, what not to see, and what not to listen to. Any child who can spend an hour or two or more if he wants with adults that he likes, who are interested in the world and like to talk about it, will on some days learn far more than they are taught those who would learn in a week of school. Leaders are not, as we are often led to think, people who go along with huge crowds following them. Leaders are people who go their own way without caring or even looking to see whether anyone is following them. Leadership qualities are not the qualities to enable people to attract followers, but those that enable them to do without them. They include, at the very least, courage, endurance, patience, humor, flexibility, resourcefulness, stubbornness, a keen sense of reality, and the ability to keep a cool and clear head even when things are going badly. True leaders, in short, do not make people into followers, but into other leaders. What is most important and valuable about the home is the best for children's growth into the world is not that it is better school than the schools, but that it isn't a school at all. It is hard not to feel that there must be something very wrong with much of what we do in school if we feel the need to worry so much about what many people call motivation. A child has no stronger desire than to make sense of the world, to move freely and to do the things that he sees bigger people along doing it. A child educated only at school is an uneducated child. The plain fact is that education in itself is a form of propaganda, deliberate scheme to outwit the pupil, not with the capacity to weigh ideas, but with a simple appetite for gulping ideas ready-made. The aim is to make citizens, which is to say docile and uninquisitive. Far from failing in its intended task, our education system is in fact succeeding magnificently because its aim is to keep the American people thoughtless enough to go on supporting the system. We get too easily bogged down in the academic part of the homeschooling, relatively minor part of the whole, which is to raise competent, caring, literate, happy people. Once upon a time, all children were home scheduled. They were not sent away from the home each day to a place just for the children, but lived, learned, worked, and played in the real world alongside adults and other children of all ages. I have noticed a fascinating phenomenon. In the 30 years of the teaching, schooling are necessary. increasingly irrelevant to the great enterprises of the planet. No one believes anymore that science is a trend in science classes, or politicians in classes, or poets in English classes. The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders. This is a great mystery to me, because thousands of human caring people work in schools as teachers and heads and administrators, but the abstract logic of the institution overwhelms their individual contribution. The ultimate goal of the educational system is to shift to the individual the burden of pursuing his own education. This will not be a widely shared pursuit until we get over our odd conviction that education is what goes on in the school building and nowhere else. I was delighted to see him growing more cautious and skeptical about what he heard, especially as he heard it from someone apparently authority. I think that is fundamental to a good education, and if it comes back to bite me from time to time, that's the price worth paying. Learning and education are a normal part of everyday life and do not need a vast, expensive bureaucracy to force them to happen. There are so many approaches to unschooling as there are people by design. A child is supposed to read when ready and interested, not on other timetable. For example, he can and will be encouraged to pursue a wide range of interests based on his interests, such as free play, inventing, experimenting scientifically, video gaming, role modeling, through friendship, spiritual development, through inquiry of self and others, athletic, learning to trust himself and others. You will not reap the fruit of individuality if your children clone their education. The home is the first and the most effective place to learn the lessons of life, truth, honor, virtue, self-control, the value of education, honest work, and the purpose and privilege of life. Nothing can take the place of a home in rearing and teaching children, and no other success can compensate for failure in the home. Homeschooling would certainly produce some socially awkward adults, but the odds are good they would have been just as quirky had they spent 12 years raising their hand for permission and go to the bathroom. The status quo was rote memorization and recitation in classroom thronged with passive children who were sternly disciplined when they express individual needs. My aim in homeschooling is to give my children the ability to be an adult learner, a skill set that will last the rest of their lives. Quotes about self-education. Those who know how to think need no teachers. Self-education is, I firmly believe, the only kind of education there is. It's what we learn after you know it all that counts. The secret of education lies in respecting the pupil. It's not for you to choose what we shall know, what he shall do. It's all chosen and foreordained, and he only holds the key to his own secret. Walk into the wealthy person's home, and one of the first things you'll see is an extensive library of books you have used to educate themselves on how to become more successful. You have to grow from inside out. None can teach you. None can make you spiritual. There is no other teacher but your own soul. Truth is not to be found outside. No teacher, no scripture can give it to you. It is inside you, and if you wish to attend it, seek your own company. Be with yourself. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured far away. Self-education is the only possible education that rests mere beneath laid on the surface of a child's nature. You either write your own script or to become an actor of someone else's. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Conclusion: I think you're working and learning until you die. All the world is this laboratory into the inquiring mind. I do not much believe in education. Each man ought to be his own model, however frightful that may be. We do not stop going to school when we graduate. No man who worships education has got the best out of education. Without a gentle contempt for education, a man's education is complete. No man's education is complete. The thing that you have been most valuable to me, I do not learn in school. The difference between school and life: in school they are taught a lesson and then given a test. In life you're given a test and then that teaches you a lesson. I've tested life and I've learned what works for me. Get over the idea that only children should spend their time in study. Be a student so long as you still have something to learn, and this will mean all your life. We now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change, and the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. Learning is a lifetime process, but there comes a time when we must stop adding and start updating. The world itself is a great teacher, a constant guide and inspiration. This is the reason why man is surrounded and sustained by the world. The learning process continues and until the day you die. The trick in life is learning how to deal with it. Always walk through life as if you have now something new to learn, and you will. Learn as much as you can while you are young, since life becomes too busy after later. I'm not a prophet, I'm not a teacher, I have no degrees. My degree is from the University of Life. Why should society feel responsible only for education of children and not for the education of adults of every age? Come forward into the light of things. Let nature be your teacher. Talent develop in quiet places, character in full current of human life. We never really grow up if we only learn how to act in public. The supreme lesson for any education should be to think for yourself and to be yourself. Absent this attainment, education creates dangerous, stupefying conformity. The length of the education is less important, but the breadth and length of your life is less important than its depth. Learning doesn't stop when the school ends, it just starts. I am learning all the time. The tombstone will be my diploma. Beautiful. God, we love this. It's amazing, right? Oh God, I want to read out the best classic books. Oh Lord, and just make it possible to inspire, uplift, and to be presentable to everybody who can forget me completely. Just bring out the absolute best from within all who hears these.